right, good morning and welcome to our program. It's 11 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. Um, Thank you for joining us for an introduction to vital records. Uh, this, my name is Susan Forbes and I am the reference supervisor for the SLNC Government and Heritage Library. This event is hosted by the State Library of North Carolina's Government and Heritage Library. To learn more about the State Library of North Carolina and the services that we offer, please check our website, which we'll put in the chat. Before we get started, I'd like to provide some information about accessibility features for the webinar. To view closed captioning, please use your mouse to hover over the control toolbar at the top or bottom of the screen and click the Closed Caption or CC button. Second, select either Show Subtitle or View Full Transcript options. To make any changes to the caption or accessibility settings, just click on the Closed Caption button and select Subtitle Settings. A window will open, and then in the left pane, click on Accessibility and make any changes that you would like. For today's webinar, you can use the chat feature to submit questions or request assistance from our staff. If you navigate to the Live Transcript tab at the bottom of your screen, you can change the chat text size by clicking on Subtitle Settings, and that will allow you to adjust your chat text size. Today's program is being recorded and will be made available via our YouTube channel. If you have questions during the event, feel free to ask your question in the chat. And if we're unable to answer that question during the presentation, we will answer it during a Q&A session at the end. Before I introduce today's guest speaker, I first wanted to share some resources for learning about what vital records are and how to access them. The Government and Heritage Library has created a North Carolina Vital Records Research Guide, which we will share in the chat. This guide covers the history of vital records in North Carolina and in the country, as well as additional resources to get you started on your research. Additionally, the Government and Heritage Library previously hosted a Vital Records webinar back in 2022, and this webinar focuses on online search strategies for locating vital records, with special emphasis on North Carolina records, as well as techniques for finding vital information when traditional documents are unavailable. And now I am very excited to introduce today's guest speaker, Allison Grindstaff. Allison works as a staff development specialist for the North Carolina Vital Records Office, which is a part of the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. In partnership with county registers of deeds offices, local health departments, and birthing facilities throughout the state, the North Carolina Vital Records Office is responsible for recording North Carolina's vital events. Now I'll hand it over to Allison to begin today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, very much. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to meet with you and to share with you some history about vital records, not only in North Carolina, but also throughout the country. All right, so to begin our conversation, let's take a look at our agenda. We're going to look at a brief overview about vital records and how it developed throughout the U.S. And then we're going to spend a little more time focusing more so on North Carolina specifically and the history. I'll also share with you the types of records that are available at the North Carolina Office of Vital Records and who is entitled or able to request copies of these documents. I'll share with you a little bit about our leadership team here at Vital Records, and finally, how to contact us in case you have any questions going forward. So let's go ahead and begin our discussion with taking a brief overview about the history of vital records throughout the United States. In colonial times, some town clerks actually kept informal notes and archives about the registration of births, marriages, and deaths that occurred in their communities. Unfortunately, though, for those records, they tended to be far from systematic or standardized. There were no laws during that time that required documentation of vital events, and the local records were at best incomplete. So, in 1639, that is when the Massachusetts Bay Colony began to require towns to record the births, the deaths, and the marriages that happened. In 1641, Connecticut followed suit and mandated town clerks to register vital events. And then by 1666, New York required registration of births, marriages, and deaths. And then moving forward to 1696, that's when Virginia enacted a law requiring vital records to be registered. By the early mid-1800s, some of the large cities identified the necessity of collecting vital statistics data. So, for example, both the health departments in Boston and New York City actually took the lead when it came to creating a formal system to track both births and deaths. Unfortunately, because it was in the bigger cities that tended to leave the rural areas and the smaller locations behind. But in 1842, Boston began systematically recording the births and the deaths. In 1847, New York City implemented a formal vital statistics system. By 1850, Philadelphia started collecting vital statistics. And by the 1860s, Chicago, as well as other cities, adopted some similar practices. As time went on, some of the state governments saw the importance of having vital records, and they passed laws to require documentation. This did tend to be a very gradual process. Some of the New England states created a robust system in the early 1600s, while other states began the process in the late 1800s and early 1900s. So by using statutes, standardized forms, and centralized databases, the infrastructure for vital records that we know today was developed. In 1847, Massachusetts actually established a statewide vital statistics system. This was followed in 1852 by New Hampshire. They implemented a similar system. In 1880, the state of New York standardized vital records. And by 1907, all the states around the country had a vital records registration system. This marked a significant milestone when it came to the history of vital records. In the present day, vital records has modernized yet again with both digital databases as well as online access. This transition allows people to move easily to obtain certified copies of vital records, such as birth certificates, death certificates, as well as marriage records. And technologies such as digitization, indexing, and search have transformed how vital records data is managed. In the 1990s, states began digitizing vital records for better access. And then by the early 2000s, online access to vital records was available in several states. In 2011, national initiatives enhanced digital record keeping. And today, most states provide online services for vital records management. So let's move on and talk a little bit about how the modern vital record systems allow us to certify personal facts, whether we're talking about things like tracing genealogy or ancestry, compiling statistics, establishing legal rights, as well as preserving local history. Few people realize just how recently such documentation has become a standardized practice. Keeping vital records has evolved enormously in a very short amount of time, and we do owe a great debt to the civic leaders who championed vital records and enshrined it into law. So it became an important milestone to track these documents in life. So that covers our discussion about a general overview with the U.S. history of vital records. Now let's focus more so on North Carolina and when North Carolina began to document these types of records. In 1868, that is the earliest recording we have of marriages that happened in our state. Raleigh actually took the lead in 1885 by reporting death records, and then 5 years later, birth records began to be reported. In 1913, throughout our state, birth and death records were reported, and then by 1920, there was a general compliance by the entire state, and by that year, about 90% of the births and the deaths that happened here were being registered. To give you a little information about the North Carolina Office of Vital Records, we are a part of the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Public Health, and we're located in Raleigh. We work in conjunction with all the Register of Deeds offices throughout the state, as well as the local health departments, funeral homes, medical certifiers. And when I say medical certifiers, specifically, who I'm referring to are the physicians, physician assistants, and nurse practitioners throughout the state, also the medical examiners, as well as the birthing facilities. And together, we are all responsible for reporting North Carolina vital events. And that does include legally registering the births, deaths, fetal deaths, which are different than deaths, marriages and divorces that happen in North Carolina. Not only do we legally register them, but they're also coded for statistical purposes. The North Carolina Office of Vital Records is responsible for maintaining these records and provide both certified or uncertified copies, whether it's to individuals, researchers, and public health programs. Back in March of 1913, that's when the North Carolina General Assembly created what's known as a statewide vital statistics law. What that law did is it required the county officials to register all the births that occurred in North Carolina because it was becoming more important to document these events for legal reasons. What that statute did is that it required a newborn born in North Carolina to be registered within 5 days of birth, whether by the physician or the midwife who attended the delivery. If there was not an attendant present at the birth, then it became the responsibility of the father or the mother to report the birth. The law also required additional information be included on the birth record, such as the baby's birth date, their full name, length of the pregnancy, the baby's birth weight, and their gender. In addition, it had information about the parents, such as their full names, where they lived, race, highest level of education, their age at the time of birth, where they were born, what they did for an occupation, how many living and dead children were previously born to the mother, if the parents were married at the time of birth, and if the mother had had a blood test for syphilis. The certificate also had the physician's signature and the name of the registrar. Also, just as an interesting fact, I'm going to share with you a copy of a birth certificate from 1919. And we'll take just a little bit of time to read over it. This is a birth certificate for a baby boy. He was born on May 24th of 1919 in Wilson County. Let's move on. We'll talk a little more about the model law from 1913. In addition, that law also addressed deaths that occurred in North Carolina, and it was required that those also be registered beginning in October of that year. So the registrars, appointed by local officials, were given the directive to issue death certificates within 3 days of death or the body being removed. And then those copies of the certificates were sent to the state registrar every month. Usually, in most counties, it's going to be the responsibility of the Register of Deeds to record the deaths. However, in a few counties, the local health department takes that responsibility. Death certificates are rich with a lot of important genealogical information. Of course, it's going to have the name of the deceased, the date and where the death occurred, what caused the death, the names of both parents, and for the mother, it'll have her maiden name. Also, where the parents were born, where the deceased lived prior to death, what their occupation was, who the attending physician was, the marital status of the deceased, and if they were married at the time of death, the name of their spouse, as well as the name of the cemetery or where the body was buried. In addition, the document also documents or identifies who the informant was. The informant is the person who provides the information about the deceased to the funeral home. And typically that does tend to be a family member. However, that doesn't mean it couldn't be a neighbor or maybe a close friend. And to share with you for review, here is a copy of a death certificate from 1900. This is for a lady who passed away on June 20th, 1900 in Wake County. And we'll take just a brief pause to review the certificate. So let's step back for a moment and just summarize some of the history of vital records. In colonial times, the reason why it became important was to protect individual property rights. So that's when the legal documents were needed. In the 18th as well as the 19th century, that's when we saw some of the large city epidemics, such as smallpox, typhoid, malaria, yellow fever, and the measles. In the late 1800s, the Foundation for Public Health began, and in 1935, all the states throughout the country were required to meet the minimum standards to document these vital events. Beginning in 1950 and up to the present day, that's when public health and research needs expanded, and they used the data on these certificates for their documentation as well as to complete their research. In 1960, that's when the National Center for Health Statistics was created, and included in the NCHS, or National Center for Health Statistics, is the Office of Vital Statistics, as well as the National Health Survey. Now, currently, the NCHS has the National Health Interview Survey, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, National Health Care Survey, as well as vital statistics. Let's take a look at these individual surveys and talk a little bit about exactly what their focus is. For the National Health Interview Survey, NHIS is the acronym for it. It's a national survey, and the purpose of it is to monitor the health of the U.S. population. And it provides insights into health of people of different ages, sexes, races, as well as ethnicities, geographical location, and social and economic circumstances. And the National Health Interview Survey is an annual study. It is conducted by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, and it collects a wide range of data on a variety of health topics, including behaviors, healthcare use, and progress that we're making toward meeting the national health objectives. The data in the survey is used to evaluate health policies and programs and to monitor changes in health behaviors over time. For the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, it's used to assess the health and nutritional status of both adults and children in the United States. And the way that data is gathered is through interviews, health examination, as well as laboratory tests. The National Healthcare Survey collects information from a broad spectrum of healthcare settings, and the purpose of it is to look at trends in the type of care provided. These surveys are nationally representative and they are provider-based. Finally, the National Vital Statistics System provides the most complete data on births and deaths that occur in the United States. This information, incidentally, also includes marriages and divorces, and it provides essential data for demographic analysis and public health planning. Typically, these statistics are gathered through civil registration systems, and they do provide a critical resource for understanding population dynamics as well as trends. Just a little more history on vital records. In 1972, the Vital Statistics Comparative Program began. What that comparative program is, it's an agreement between NAPSIS and the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics, or the NCHS. The purpose of it is to improve the relevance of vital statistics used to measure and monitor key health indicators. And this project is mandated by federal law. It does require cooperation between the NCHS as well as the states to provide access to statistical information from birth certificates. And it was established by law in 1974. Talking about NAPSIS, that is an acronym for the National Association for Public Health Statistics and Information Systems. It is a nonprofit organization, and it assists with the secure exchange of public health data in the United States and ensuring that personal information is protected. With the National Center for Health Statistics, the support services they offer is some technical assistance. Naturally, they support the model law, as well as coding causes of death. They do provide training and education opportunities, as well as assisting with assuring the quality of the records. And naturally, they have special projects and improvements that they work on. When it comes to vital statistics today, it is a collaborative partnership. The Vital Statistics Cooperative Program does include all 57 registration areas, and it requires VCSP contract. Now, the records are much more electronic than ever before. However, we are finding that they still need work, and data quality continues to be an issue. So that gives us a little bit of history about vital records within North Carolina. Let's talk a little bit more specifically about the types of records that are available at the North Carolina Office of Vital Records. We do have birth records beginning in 1913 and of course to present day. Our death records begin in 1930. Marriages we have beginning in 1962 and divorces begin in 1958. There are older records that are available at the Register of Deeds offices in the counties where events took place. The North Carolina State Archives is a wonderful resource. And for the older divorce records, those can be found at the Clerk of Court's office. So let's talk a little more in detail about the types of records that are available, whether they're a certified copy or an uncertified copy, and what's the difference between the two. A certified copy of a record is issued by the North Carolina Office of Vital Records, and it includes a statement that certifies it's a true copy or a true abstract of the original record. It does have the state registrar's signature as well as a raised vital record seal. A certified copy is required for most legal or official purposes when that type of vital record is requested. So to give you an example, A certified copy can be used to obtain apostille services through the North Carolina Secretary of State's office. Certified copies are not available to everyone. There is a North Carolina law that specifies that certified copies of certificates are available only to the following people, and they have to provide proof of identity as well as eligibility. So when we're talking about accessing birth records, naturally, someone can get a copy of their own birth record. But in addition, so can their parents or step-parent, current spouse, child or stepchild, sibling, grandparent, grandchild, legal representative, social worker, power of attorney. Law enforcement is able to get an uncertified copy of a birth record. A legal guardian or custodian, or someone who's able to show tangible interest or legal need, are able to obtain certified copies. When it comes to death records for the decedent, their parents or step-parent, if they were married at the time of death, their current spouse, children, stepchildren, grandparent, siblings, grandchild, legal representative, legal guardian or custodian, or again, someone who's able to show a tangible interest or a legal need, are able to obtain a certified copy. For marriage records, naturally the bride or groom, they're able to get a copy, but so are their parents or step-parent, children or stepchildren, siblings, grandparent, grandchild, a legal representative, power of attorney, or a legal guardian or custodian. When it comes to divorce records, the husband or wife naturally are able to get a copy, but also their parents and step-parents can, children, stepchildren, sibling, grandparent, grandchild, legal representative, legal guardian or custodian, and again, someone showing a legal need or a tangible interest. For fetal death records, the parents or the step-parent are able to request a copy. A sibling, grandparent, legal representative, legal guardian or custodian, or someone showing a tangible interest or legal need. Just to share with you the difference between a death record and a fetal death record. Fetal death records are issued when the gestational period is 20 weeks or more, and the baby was stillborn, meaning there were no signs of life at the time of delivery. So that's a difference between a death record and a fetal death record. Going back to discussing the differences between certified versus uncertified copies. Uncertified copies are going to be on plain or white paper, and it is clearly stamped on the document uncertified. It is also not going to have a raised vital record seal. The uncertified copies are intended for informational purposes only. They cannot be used for legal purposes. They are available to anyone who requests them unless there's a legal restriction prohibiting that. Of course, if someone would like to get a copy, they have to provide us with all the facts that we request on the application, and there are search fees for both the certified and the uncertified copies. Back with my illustration about a certified copy, I mentioned there could be an apostille service. And just to share with you what an apostille is, that's a specialized certificate that's issued by a government authority, and the purpose of it is to verify the authenticity of a public document, and it can be a birth certificate, a marriage license, or an educational diploma. This type of certificate is particularly important when it comes to documents that are used in countries that are part of the 1961 Hague Convention. And the Hague Convention simplified the process of legalizing documents when it comes to international use. Now, the North Carolina Office of Vital Records cannot provide or facilitate the apostille service. Obtaining an apostille for a certificate is handled by the requester once they receive the certificate from Vital Records. The North Carolina Secretary of State's office is the one who provides the apostille service, and they will only accept certified copies to provide that type of service. So now that we know the type of documents that are available at Vital Records, let's change our focus for just a minute and talk about the type of identification that Vital Records will accept. Our preferred form is going to be an unexpired government-issued identification that has a photo of the person who's requesting the certificate, as well as their current address, their signature, and some type of a unique identifying number like a driver's license number or a barcode. We will also accept a United States issued driver's license or ID card, so any of the states around the country will accept those, as well as a driver's license or an ID card issued by a U.S. territory. U.S. military identification cards, as long as it has the bearer's signature, are acceptable. We will also accept passports issued by the U.S. or a foreign government. In addition, resident alien cards are also acceptable, as well as employment authorization cards. There are a few forms of those, and temporary residence cards. So those are the ones that we will accept. As far as what is not considered acceptable are going to be permanent resident cards that do not have the applicant's signature, an alien registration receipt card, a USA B1 or B2 visa, a non-resident border crosser card, Mexican voter registration cards, or a matricula consular ID card. We will also not accept a non-resident alien Mexican or Canadian border crosser card. In addition, U.S. citizen ID cards are not accepted. Tribal ID cards that do not contain the bearer's signature, and also U.S. military identification cards that also do not have the bearer's signature. So those are the types of documentations that are acceptable or unacceptable. And we are going to bypass the section on adoption, but I'm going to move forward and share with you a little bit about our leadership team here at Vital Records. Tara Ankra is our state registrar. Reporting to Tara is Joseph Watkins, who is our section chief. Tina Rogers is the assistant deputy registrar. Currently, our director's position is vacant. Tiana Tillman is the partner services manager. Ashley Rogers heads up our business operations team. And Jonna Thatch is our communications and program coordinator. So winding down our discussion, in case you have any questions going forward and you would like to contact us at the North Carolina Office of Vital Records, that can be completed in one of three different ways. We do have our main telephone number, which is 919-733-3000. If you'd like to send us an email, the email address is going to be vitalrecordstraining@dhhs.nc.gov. And then our website is vitalrecords.nc.gov. Thank you all for your time and your participation today. Thank you also for this opportunity to present this material to you. I hope all of you have a good rest of your day.
All right. Thank you, Allison, for such a wonderful and informative presentation. We'll now open it up to questions from the audience. If you have any questions, please go ahead and drop them in the chat, and we'll get started on the Q&A portion of today's webinar. I do think we have a couple of questions already queued up that folks asked during the session. So we'll get started with those. The first question is about cemetery records. Is there a way to find everyone buried in a particular cemetery, a place where you can search on place of burial?
So thank you. That's a great question. So as far as where someone specifically is buried, that was going to tend to more so be something that's not going to be on the death certificate. Well, the death certificate does have the place of burial, so that information is on that document.
And let's see, are records for records in Raleigh for the entire state?
Yes,
And for genealogy research purposes, can a person obtain a non-certified copy of a birth or death certificate? And can
yeah,
widows obtain death certificates?
yes. So you can obtain a non-certified copy for research purposes. One caveat to that is if someone was adopted, then their original birth record is going to be sealed. And only the adoptee or their adopted family member, spouse, or children are able to get a copy of the adopted birth certificate. The biological family cannot.
And more of just a general question about adoption records in North Carolina. Are adoption records open in North Carolina?
No, adoption records are sealed.
And let's see, this is sort of a repeat question, but more specific, does your office have birth death certificates for all counties in North Carolina
Yes, we do.
for the dates mentioned? And are the fetal death records generally found in the same place as regular death records?
Fetal death records can only be obtained from the North Carolina Office of Vital Records.
Of these questions are probably more geared towards the Government and Heritage Library than you, Allison. So
Yes.
we may leave those for the end. But I'll go ahead. Speaking to the vital records, if you're not sure if a person was born in North Carolina, what is the easiest way to search on other states or even nationally for those vital records?
That would depend on the different states with their requirements and laws. I'm sure there's going to be some variation between what North Carolina has on law, but I would just check with that state and see what their requirements are.
If a person is moved after they're buried, is there a secondary document identifying the second burial?
There is a document that indicates that the body was disinterred and reinterred.
And does North Carolina have a cemetery commission board for the counties or for the state as a whole?
So vital records doesn't get involved in that specific process. That sounds like something more so that the funeral home board would handle.
And are the early Raleigh records that you mentioned inclusive of people of color?
Yes.
All right. This is a question about adoptees attaining. How does an adoptee obtain a certified copy um, of their original birth certificate?
They would need a court order to have the record unsealed.
Just looking to see if I see any other questions. There are questions about handouts. So we did put in the chat a handout that the state libraries, Government and Heritage Library created to help guide you through North Carolina vital records, and also include some of the alternative documents that are available for timeframes before records were kept standardly. So that's in the chat as a handout. Allison, are you going to share your slides after the presentation?
we'll be happy to send a copy over to
Okay.
them.
Okay, I think we can send those out to participants as well. Um, and then that contact information that was shown in the process, we got a question about the vital records contact information again, so that will be in the slides. And I think, just checking the chat one last time, I think that those are all the questions that we have. Oh, I see one more question came up in the chat. We do have time for it. So, under what grounds will a CT under what grounds can a birth certificate be unsealed? And I think that was about the court order to unseal a birth certificate for an adoptee. Maybe a follow-up question.
That's a decision that the courts would have to make. That isn't something that Vital Records has any jurisdiction about.
And then I am seeing one last question here. What is the process for correcting or amending a vital record?
So so for a record to be amended or corrected, it's going to be a copy that is registered by the state. We do have applications on our website where someone can request an application, and they can fill out the application online to request a birth certificate be amended. And then we also have guidelines for the other types of certificates. So all that's included on our website.
Um, what about delayed birth records?
A delayed birth record is created whenever someone was born, and for whatever reason, and that could be various reasons, the birth certificate wasn't filed until the child was at least a year old or older. And we do have that process included on our website as well.
And what are the time restrictions on access to vital records for living persons? Are adoption records unsealed after some time, perhaps 100 years? If not, why?
That information would have to be shared with you by the clerk of court. I don't have that information available at Vital Records.
All right, we'll do one last call for questions. We had a pause there and then had a flurry of more questions. Anyone else like to share a question in the chat? Can delayed birth certificates be created for a person who has died?
Yes, it can. It's a more difficult process, but yes, it can be.
Right. Anyone else with a question? What Native American records exist? Do they go to the colonial time?
That's a really good question. That's going to require a little more research.
And I would point you to the research guide from the State Library of North Carolina's Government and Heritage Library that may have some information on that topic. And then I'm also seeing a question, is there a website we can search for marriage certificates from the 1920s? What is the cost of such a search?
That would be something you'd want to look for within the North Carolina Archives. On their website, they'll have the information how you can do those searches.
Those are also some things you might be able to see possibly if you come to the State Library, Government and Heritage Library, and take a look at our subscription databases. Right. Okay, I think the chat has slowed down to a stop, so we'll go ahead and end the webinar in just a moment. But first, to all our viewers, your feedback is very important to us. Please take a few minutes to complete our survey. Following today's program, we really do want to hear what you have to say, and we do use participant feedback to inform our future outreach events. So it is very much appreciated if you can take a moment to fill out our survey. So this will conclude today's webinar with the North Carolina Vital Records Office. Thank you, Allison, once again. It was a wonderful presentation. And thank you all for joining us today, and we will see you next time.